Hello and welcome back to the semifinals of the World Championship in Through the Ages. This time we are taking a look at Group 3 of the semifinals, and in this group we have the players wolvs, dots, kyshantry and HCsquared. And before we take a look at one of the 4-player games of this group, we will first of all take a quick look at the rating. And as you can see, maybe the favorite player in this group is wolvs, who is in the 9th position in the rating at the moment, has just had some really great performances in the recent months, has become one of the top players. You just saw him in the last Grandmaster season in Intermezzo, which didn't go ideally for him. He got relegated, but still finished with a very solid amount of points. So one of the top players and maybe the favorite player in the group. Then we have Dots, who is maybe an interesting case because here, before he joined this year's World Championship, didn't play for some years, but I think 3 or 4 years ago, he was also one of the top players, played some seasons in Grandmaster in the Intermezzo Championship, even finished one Intermezzo Championship in the Grandmaster division with 24 points, which in almost every case is enough to win the league. But in this season, Dyron Tropy had an even better run with 27 points, and so Dots didn't manage to win the league, but had a very great season nonetheless. Also, he won, I think, a mixed duel tournament, which was a very big 2-player tournament back then. So he back then was one of the best players. But then I think for some years he didn't participate really in tournaments, and now for this year's World Championship he signed up again, participated in this tournament, and as you can see, made it to the semi-final, showcasing that he still has it in him. And so it will be interesting to see if he maybe can go even further. Then we have kyshantry, a player who played already in Master, as you can see, in either Intermezzo or International Championship, is a very solid player, a player that I think also participates in a lot of tournaments, but as you can see, a 51st position in the rating. I think going to the semifinals is really a great result for him, and let's see if he maybe can go even further. And then maybe potentially the underdog in the group, and also really great that he made it so far in this tournament. We have HCsquared, who is at the moment the 132nd positioned player in the rating. According to this title bracket, his best position in Intermezzo International was the Platinum Division. I'm not totally sure if that is correct, but he has definitely played in those tournaments some seasons, and but for him a really great success making it so far in the World Championship, and let's see if he manages to maybe go even further, facing now some really tough competition in the semifinals. Alright, with that short introduction, let's take a look at one of the 4-player games of this group, and I do it like last time, meaning I don't know the outcome of the game, I haven't watched anything what happened in the game, so let's find out together how this game will be going. Alright, here we are in the game, and first of all we can take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. And I also take now a first look at those. We have Pierre, but no internet. We have Fleming and Chaplin, but no Marlene, but the Hollywood is there as well, so definitely some theater synergy. There's Bill Gates, is a very strong lab leader. There's also Marie Curie, Steve Jobs, the spaceflight, and the Manhattan Project, so definitely some synergy for that direction as well. We have the Red Cross, Gandhi, and the Manhattan Project for the military. We have Ocean Liner, but no Maria in H2. We have some culture leaders with Shakespeare and Bach. We have James Cook, but no Suez Canal. We have Railroad, but no James Watt. We have all of the military action leaders, also no Bell. We have no military action leader in H1. Nostradamus and Barbarossa to help with the strength. Eleanor and Columbus are some good transitional leaders. We have Gutenberg, but no Leonardo. Also Michelangelo is there together with Machu Picchu and St. Peter's Basilica. We have both of the science wonders and the Taj Mahal. Then kyshantry is in the first position, and he just picks the library. He also could have taken some very interesting leaders here, but maybe he thinks that he can take a leader next turn, so I suspect that probably all of those leaders will be taken, so going for a leader could have maybe also been an idea, but let's see, maybe one of the other players will take the Stonehenge, and that would mean, unless of course it's taken by wolves, so let's see if maybe kyshantry will get a leader for one civil action at the next turn. Dots goes for Hammurabi with Richland, I think a very strong start for him. HCsquared goes for Boudica and the Urban Growth. And then it's Wolf's turn, and he will indeed go for the Stonehenge, meaning kyshantry's pick, I think, paid off at the end. Wolves wants to grab one of the wonders. I guess he also has now a chance to just get a leader at his next turn, and that means that kyshantry indeed has Aristotle available for one civil action. He will just take him, elect him, build a mine, increase his population, so that's very standard stuff. Then it's Dot's turn. He will go for Hammurabi. Will he be willing to take Rome Roads for 2, or is he rather maybe interested in the Engineering Genius? He takes the Rome Roads, I think a very strong wonder in 4-player games, so he grabs himself that, lets the Engineering Genius still stay on 2 civil actions. HCsquared goes for the second lab, increases his population, elects Boudica, takes the rich land, doesn't go for the Engineering Genius, but I think it's fine because it would have been an additional civil action, so the rich land which he can use to build the third mine should be the better pick, and in 4-player games you don't have to be too much concerned about giving that card now for one civil action to one of his opponents. Now it's Wolf's turn, he goes for Cleo, takes the Engineering Genius, builds the second lab, at the next turn can maybe build a third mine and start working on the Stonehenge. Cleo, I think, a leader that works very well together with the Stonehenge. Kyshantry seeds, opens the development of crafts, will build the second lab, builds the step of the library, takes the swordsman, scoring the first science with Aristotle. Make sure to have a military tech. Dots builds the second lab, builds 2 steps of the Roman roads, possible thanks to the development of crafts, plus him having a rich land. Otherwise, of course, building the second lab plus building 2 steps would normally not be possible already that early. And then he has 2 civil actions left, takes the alchemy and is now well prepared to just build up a strong economy, making nice use out of the additional civil actions of Hammurabi. HCsquared opens the development of settlement. He will build the third mine now, is not willing to gamble on an H1 wonder, which maybe could be interesting with Silk Road and Universitas being there, but Hanging Gardens can also be a very fine wonder. And he even takes it together with Michelangelo, maybe wants to go for a bit of a greedy direction potentially. Wolves builds a step of the Stonehenge, builds the third mine, increases his population, and takes another copy of Engineering Genius. Interesting that he takes that copy, because for the Stonehenge he can't use it for its full value, and then we need to see if he maybe gets another wonder, so especially with a 4-step wonder, maybe it could have been an idea to just build another step without the Engineering Genius, but let's see how that will work for him with the Engineering Genius 1. Kyshantry builds a step of the library, takes the cartography, scoring another science, takes the frugality and increases his population. He was missing 1 resource to finish the library already this turn. Also he reveals the Legion tactic. Dots finishes the Rome Roads. He could have also gone for an alchemy upgrade, but decides to get the Rome Roads going first. Let's see if he maybe also manages to stay out of consumption. He goes for Saladin. Isn't a big upgrade for Hammurabi, but just making sure that he has that additional civil action for even longer. Has the cultural heritage, can soon upgrade to alchemy. Is willing to miss out on those knights, which maybe could mean that he will have a bit of an issue to get prepared for the military. HCsquared will already this turn go for Michelangelo, interestingly, finishes the Hanging Gardens and takes the bread and circuses. I'm not sure if I agree with electing Michelangelo already, it's only the 2 culture, and I think the economical value from Boudica might still be worth more in this situation. So no, I'm not sure if I agree about this decision. I think taking Michelangelo can be fine, he has just lots of potential, and so I think that was fine. But I think I would have just stayed with Boudica for a little longer. Also taking the bread and circuses with already having the Hanging Gardens may be a bit questionable, but there's Pierre and at some point he will need more happy faces. Wolves this turn goes for the Code of Laws, develops it, increases his population, builds a step of the Stonehenge, has to build a warrior to get out of corruption. Doesn't take those knights interestingly, meaning that Dots after all will get another chance to grab one of those for even cheaper. Kyshantry seeds and opens the development of markets. He will finish the library this turn, takes a copy of knights, scoring his 3rd science with Aristotle, develops them, builds one, takes the reserves, reveals no tactic for now. Dots this turn goes for the alchemy, goes for 2 upgrades, increases his population and takes the knights. HCsquared will offer the Trade Routes Agreement, wants to be able to use food as resources. With Michelangelo, of course, having even more resources can be quite strong. Also, he has some additional food and happy faces thanks to the Hanging Gardens. He takes the iron, a very important tech with having Michelangelo, and then increases his population 2 times. Wolvs seeds and opens the development of trade routes. He this turn will use the Engineering Genius, finishes the Stonehenge, uses Cleo's resources again, builds a warrior, goes for the iron, doesn't go for Nostradamus, but with being into military action, Nostradamus can also be a bit problematic. Maybe he could have gone for Monarchy and Nostradamus somehow, but the iron, of course, with being able to go for 2 upgrades at the next turn also looks quite strong. Kyshantry will increase his population, builds a knight, takes the St. Peter's Basilica interestingly for quite expensive with having no additional resource production for now. Maybe he just struggled to find some other alternative ways to spend his civil actions, but no, an interesting pick here, as it might be a bit expensive, but of course can still be nice to have something to invest the resources into. Dots opens the development of religion, takes the free religion, develops the knights, builds one. Now the players start to get stronger with the event deck being about to flip. He even builds another knight, takes the monarchy, plays the cultural heritage at the next turn. He's just enough science to develop the monarchy. HCsquared seeds as well. The development of civil life is revealed. He will use it to develop the iron. Let's take a look at which players seeded the most events. Red and yellow have seeded 2, meaning Kyshantry and HCsquared have seeded 2. The other players have seeded 1 event. HCsquared will go for 2 iron upgrades and develops the warfare to get a bit stronger. Maybe without the additional military action he potentially would have been in danger of an aggression, but he remains the weakest for now. Maybe there's a chance that he will get Universitas at the next turn, which would be quite strong with Michelangelo. Wolvs goes for some iron upgrades. This turn goes for Nostradamus. He was actually already available for 1 civil action at the turn before, meaning there was no card taken in front of him. Otherwise he would have been discarded, but like this he actually cycles back interestingly, and Wolvs gets another chance to take him and will also take him this turn. He then takes the masonry and increases his population. Also, with the event deck just having flipped, Wolvs will have the fully knowledge about the next event deck. Kyshantry going for another knight, and of course that means that he has the heavy cavalry tactic available. Will go for Columbus if he has a strong colony. That is a very strong pickup, with Columbus being a very strong transitional leader. Maybe he's also going for a bit of a gamble, with that being the only leader available for him at the moment. He elects him, takes the rich land, takes another rich land, and those will maybe help him to get some resource production going quickly at some point. Now it's Dot's turn. He will go for the monarchy, is now at 6 civil and 3 military actions, at least as long as he is Saladin. Also builds another knight, prepares maybe to copy the heavy cavalry tactic at the next turn, takes the irrigation, the rich land, the breakthrough, and the code of laws. Doesn't go for the Universitas, but yeah, maybe that also would be a bit of a costly investment. Maybe it's better to leave himself open for those H2 wonders, and maybe with having many civil actions, not the highest production, also the Silk Road could potentially be a more interesting wonder for him here than the Universitas. And no, he is now at 7 strength, won't take the strength of Saladin, indicating that he probably has enough defense cards to defend, or he's willing to take the gamble. HCsquared will go for an iron upgrade, builds a warrior, copies the legion tactic, is now at 6 strength, but would need 3 defense cards to defend against Kyshantry. Interestingly, he doesn't go for the Universitas, rather wants to make sure to get the irrigation. Maybe he is rather looking at that Machu Picchu now, which of course gives him even more resource production, even more resources to build further wonders. Nonetheless, I think the additional science of the Universitas could also be extremely strong for him, allowing him to get maybe more easily into an H2 government form. So no, I think I would probably prefer the Universitas, but the Machu Picchu of course also a very strong wonder to have with Michelangelo. Now it's Wolf's turn. He seeds and opens the wealthy territory. Kyshantry is actually the only player willing to bid for that. Maybe also to the relief of his opponents. He will now get a bit weaker, but actually not that much, because he can keep his heavy cavalry. Wins it very cheaply for just a warrior. Wolves takes the warfare, wants to go up to 3 military actions, which is quite strong with Nostradamus. Upgrades his last mine, plays the cultural heritage before he will lose that card to the end of the age, and then takes the alchemy. It's actually the first event seeded since the event deck has flipped. Now it's Kyshantry's turn. He uses Columbus this turn, has drawn the vast territory. So sadly for him there's no Suez Canal, but nonetheless strong. Gotten already 2 colonies, the wealthy territory being extremely helpful for him to actually be able to finish the St. Peter's Basilica. He will increase his population this turn, builds another knight, Oh well, at the next turn, maybe he could even go for another heavy cavalry, and who knows, if he has an aggression, maybe he can go for one for the aggression at the next turn, or maybe in 2 turns when he potentially has gone for another knight. Goes for a bit of an aggressive play. Let's see if he maybe picks up an additional military action soon, because with being on 2 military actions, of course, a bit annoying going for such an aggressive play, but it could still be interesting. He takes the breakthrough, which he can do thanks to the additional hand space that he has from the library, and then I think plays the reserves for resources. H2 starts. It's Dot's turn. He offers the open borders agreement to wolves. Both of them had already 3 military actions, so both will now be going up to 4. Dots has a bit of an uprising issue, but can fix it with playing the reserves for food and increases his population, probably planned for that. He then will take the iron and starts going for 1 upgrade. Also, he copies the heavy cavalry tactic, going up to 11 strength, so he should now be safe from any aggressions. HCsquared takes the knights, develops the knights, builds one, has the phalanx tactics. With that, at least there's a chance to defend himself, and then he will indeed go for the Machu Picchu. So let's see how many wonders he will be able to build with Michelangelo in H2. Wolves, Seeds, and the Reign of Terror is revealed. Unfortunately for HCsquared, Wolves wins the tiebreaker, and HCsquared will lose the population, which is a bit annoying. He doesn't have a free one, he doesn't have at the moment enough to get more population out. Maybe he can lose a warrior, but actually that could make him vulnerable again, so not ideal. Let's see what he will decide to lose at his next turn. Wolves takes this early copy of journalism. There's also some synergy with Shakespeare and Fleming in H3, so let's see if we'll go down that road, but even without having that in mind, I think just for the economical value plus the increased cultural production, building the journalism is quite strong, and then he takes a copy of Swordsman just maybe to be a bit safer. Let's see if kyshantry will be able to pull off an aggression. And indeed he will. Oh, and HCsquared loses another population. That is very hurtful now. Having to destroy 2 things, that is quite a setback. Let's see how he will be able to recover from that. Kyshantry will use the additional resources to finish St. Peter's Basilica. If he would have had an additional military action, he could have even built another knight, but he is also lacking cards at the moment. So he first of all needs to start drawing some new cards. Finishing St. Peter's Basilica gets him out of corruption. It also means, though, that he doesn't take cannons or coal. Both of them could be interesting cards, but maybe, especially for the coal, he could have a shot of getting that card also at the next turn, so he just plays his turn effectively and is now probably hoping to get into coal. And now the library is actually extremely important for him. I just wanted to say that he will have some issues because of his hand space, but the library allows him to, for example, go for coal at the next turn, or a government form if one is on the row. Now it's Dot's turn. He will go for the Code of Laws, has now even more civil actions to work with. Let's see if he will pick up the Silk Road. I think that could be an interesting wonder for him in this situation. However, maybe he also wants to have something like strategy, or just the architecture, of course, also very interesting. And the problem with going for the Silk Road would also be that there are some really interesting H2 wonders that he would block himself from, so I think it's fine to pass on that wonder and maybe rather be prepared for the Ocean Liner, because kyshantry, who is playing in front of him, can't easily take the Ocean Liner. Wolves would be able to, but with kyshantry playing in front of him, Dots has maybe some decent chances to get the wonder for himself, and then it's probably better to not block himself from that and break through an architecture, also both very strong cards. HCsquared, let's see what he will lose. Oh, there's actually the Ocean Liner revealed. Unfortunately for HCsquared, who does not have enough civil actions to take it, first has to finish the Machu Picchu. He lost a warrior, and he lost his temple. Which with Michelangelo is of course a bit costly, losing 2 cultural production, but at this point probably better than losing anything economical. So he just finishes the Machu Picchu. Let's see if he will pick up a new wonder immediately. No, instead he develops the irrigation. Maybe one is hoping for Ocean Liner or Railroad at the next turn, but I think maybe even both of those wonders could be taken away. But maybe then there could also still be a shot at getting the statue at the next turn. So kyshantry will probably take the coal, and then I think the statue should be discarded before his next turn. So maybe the statue could have been an idea, because it's just strong to get another wonder with Michelangelo, and I could imagine that both of those wonders even could be taken. But maybe Dots will also want to have the statue or something. Wolves Seeds and opens the developed territory. Kyshantry being able to win another colony. Maybe he will be able to go for James Cook at least as a bit of colonization payoff, as is able to win this colony for a knight. And wolvs, as expected, just grabs the ocean liner. I think there's no debate about that. He could have grabbed the breakthrough with his last civil action, but instead Raider wants to make sure to get a bit stronger. And yeah, as now not the weakest, or he was not the weakest before that, but yeah, it's interesting that he goes for that investment, but maybe he has a little bit of knowledge that pushes him in that direction. He's not longer one of the two weakest, so in case of call to arms or raiders, he doesn't get punished now. Now it's Kyshantry's turn. Thanks to the additional hand space from the library, he is able to just pick up the Republic, can develop it, and I imagine that he will now take strategy in coal. Unless he maybe has... Oh, I guess he has no H2 tactic drawn yet. I think he hasn't drawn any H2 cards. And yeah, that would be my first guess. Grabbing the coal, grabbing the strategy. Let's see if he will do it. No, we will actually go for a coal upgrade. A bit greedy, not grabbing the strategy here. Of course, getting the coal going earlier is also quite valuable. And I guess there are 3 military action leaders. Maybe with Catherine and Napoleon being there, maybe he can allow himself the risk of going for that coal upgrade. But Dotsov probably will be quite happy to get the strategy now. At least Kyshantry is in the military lead, so I think it's a fine call with having in mind that those military action leaders are available. Even though that maybe means that he can't go for James Cook that nicely. He goes back up to 15 strength. Dots seeds, another colony is revealed. This time Kyshantry is not able to win it. Instead wolves, who wins it for swordsman and a bunch of cards. Dots goes for one more upgrade to his iron mines, grabs the railroad as expected. Both railroad and ocean liner are taken away from HCsquared. And then Dots takes the breakthrough, the rifleman and the strategy. I think he's now very well set up for some strength push with the railroad strength. And the cards that he also took in addition to that has also the cannons. So we could maybe see, maybe not already the next turn, but like in 3 turns or something, I would not be surprised to see him go for a bit of pressure with the military. Even though he has, of course, no population income yet. HCsquared upgrades his farm, has now some very strong food production, takes the cannons, the frugality, goes for another upgrade. And now I think his position is a bit tricky now. Low in science, low in civil actions. I think here we can see that maybe the Universitas could have been more important. Now he's struggling to spend his resource. I think the food is very important for him from the Machu Picchu, but the resources are now a bit of a problem. So having gone for Universitas, maybe grabbing the statue the turn before could have been interesting for him. But let's see what wonders are left. Harvard College. Harvard College, if he manages to get one, I think would be huge. So let's see if he gets a chance to grab that. Wolves seeds and opens the reds. That's of course unfortunate for HCsquared, just having upgraded his food. Now everything is lost and I think he really needs some more population. At least he will still be producing a lot. Then Wolves finishes the ocean liner, gets his population going. Maybe we'll grab the opera. That could be a sign of him going for Shakespeare maybe. And indeed he grabs the opera. Let's see if he is pulling off a Shakespeare at the end. Let's see if Kyshantry will grab one of those military action leaders. He goes for one more coal upgrade, goes for Catherine, doesn't want to have the additional strength from Napoleon for now, but he would also only get 2 strength from him, so I think Catherine should be the correct choice. Maybe there's also a chance to use her politics ability at the next turn. He takes some yellow cards in the selective breeding. I think he has a solid position now, produces some culture, has lots of civil actions, has some nice coal upgrades going, and a healthy yellow bank. Also being the strongest for now. And Dots, maybe even earlier than expected, will go for some military stuff. HCsquared will get hit by a war over territory. And yeah, so Dots maybe will just finish the railroad, develop the strategy that already is enough to go for some, for really some strength. Can he develop architecture and strategy? Yes, he's exactly enough science with the breakthrough, so that is working very well together. He goes for the strategy, for the architecture. Also for Nobel, Wave finishes railroad is a 21 strength already at the next turn, and now HCsquared with having lost some food to the reds. I think now some very unfortunate things are coming together for him. Already lost 2 population earlier, now lost to the reds, and now he gets hit by that war just when he has no population available. With the frugality, he would have at least gotten 2 population out, maybe even 3, even though the third would be unhappy, but that would be a lot easier for him. Then he still wouldn't have enough science to go for the cannons, so maybe not the biggest change. Napoleon is now discarded, which he could have maybe used for defending, so now I think things are getting very dangerous for him. And Dots now finishes the railroad. HCsquared seeds, opens the rebellion. Dots, at least he will get a little bit of a revenge with Dots now losing 2 civil actions, but that's a very small consolation prize. He will this turn take the Revolutionary Idea. I think a card that's extremely important for him. Just develops the Bread and Circuses, takes the Frugality to get more population out, and yeah, probably that's maybe all he could do. Maybe he could try to get into Scientific Method, but yeah, now I think things are looking quite dangerous for him. Wolves offers the international trade agreement to HCsquared. Good. Probably a good target to offer that pack to. It looks really rough for him now, so Wolves can maybe have some hopes that HCsquared won't be in contention for the same positions as he at the end. Wolves, interestingly, wants to have some additional food. He has the Ocean Liner, but soon that additional food will help him to not have any famine issues. He takes the Cavalryman, has no cannons or cavalryman yet. How many military techs are there left? Now there's 1 cannon, 1 cavalryman, 1 rifleman left. Wolves goes for a cavalryman, goes for an upgrade, is now at 14 strength, and he indeed goes for Shakespeare. Let's see if he will be able to defend himself. He still needs to get into a government form, so he also still needs to get a couple of things running. But with Shakespeare, he will have some huge culture potential, and as soon as he has maybe fixed his government form, maybe he can even do revolution at the next turn. Then he has the Ocean Liner, some production, journalisms, and could be very well set up. Now it's Kyshantry's turn, and he opens the immigration, giving him an additional population. This turn he will go for the selective breeding. Builds another knight, is now at 21 strength, and then plays the resources, takes the Scientific Method, the rich land, and interestingly the justice system, but probably he didn't have anything else to do with this last civil action. Dot steals 3 yellow tokens from HCsquared. It's a very, very big swing. Let's see if he can go for another aggressive play. And indeed, he will plunder HCsquared. To be honest, that might not even be that bad for HCsquared. I think at the moment he can't spend all of his resource anyway. The food maybe is a bit annoying, but he still should be able to increase his population 2 times with the Frugality at the next turn. Or maybe not actually, because he has lost some yellows now. So I think he actually can only increase his population once. We will see it soon at his turn. But yeah. Of course, still not great for HCsquared getting hit by an aggression, and quite a nice boost for Dots, who gets an even bigger economy going now. I think Dots probably having the best economy now, even though Kyshantry also could be competing with that nice yellow bank, but I mean Dots also has a nice yellow bank now. For the moment has more resource production, more science production. Both have upgraded their food just now. Kyshantry, of course, has the culture lead, so soon we will be at the beginning of age 3. Then I will be doing my famous guesses again. That is, of course, a long tradition since one video that I'm doing those. So let's see if I will be able to guess the outcome again at the beginning of age 3. HCsquared this turn will use the Frugality, and indeed he can only increase his population once. Goes for Robespierre. I think Robespierre could maybe give him the boost that he potentially needs to come back into the game. He could have also maybe grabbed the Harvard College with Michelangelo, but he would not be able to grab it and finish it immediately. And I think now getting the Republic, not missing out on H3 draws later, getting the Robespierre Revolution, then now going now up to a lot of civil actions, I think could be a way for him back into the game. He still has a bit of culture, he still has some good resource and food production, so he is definitely not out of the game here, but of course still at 8 strength, so if any of the opponents have some aggressions, they will probably be able to deploy them. He then builds the Bread and Circuses, plays the Revolutionary Idea, and develops the cannons, indicating that he maybe has already a tactic for them, and something like mobile artillery could maybe be ideal, or also the fortifications, maybe also a Napoleonic, with being able to go for it at least outdated. Wolves this turn will elect Shakespeare, indeed, goes for the revolution, has his government form set up now, uses the Ocean Liner, builds another cavalryman, is at 18 strength, which is not enough to prevent a yellow token loss from Kyshantry, but maybe he has some hope that if Kyshantry has an aggression, that he will choose that rather for his politics phase. And there's of course also the possibility of a war, Kyshantry declaring another war over territory against HCsquared. Now it will be interesting to see if HCsquared has indeed a tactic available. Developing the cannons also could have been very important in case maybe a spy would have hit him, so that he has the military tech already developed, so probably also a very wise move in that regard. Kyshantry goes for the coal upgrade, goes for the justice system, interestingly. Maybe it could bite him a bit, not saving up his science for something else, but I guess he goes for the Harvard College, and having even more civil actions is also not bad. He then takes the patriotism, so 23 strength. And now the pain train continues. Dots will go for a raid against HCsquared, so getting only 3 resources out of it. HCsquared at least not losing the most expensive buildings, but still, of course, very annoying. Dots goes for the opera, builds one, starts a bit of culture production now with the architecture. Those operas are relatively cheap for him, especially considering his relatively good science production. Then he develops the organized religion, maybe just being civil action efficient here. Let's see how HCsquared will be able to defend against a dead war. Also H3 will start. HCsquared seeds, opens the inhabited territory, and at the end wolvs is able to win it. For just a swordsman, I think a nice grab by him. HCsquared will rebuild the bread and circuses, increases population, builds a cannon, builds a knight, builds another bread and circuses. Let's see if he builds another cannon and has the mobile artillery, has the outdated Napoleonic army. So probably he will destroy something. What will he destroy? Maybe just the iron mine, because he is at the moment maybe more resource that he can spend anyway, but it's of course painful. Or he is just accepting to be now on very low science and destroy the lab. Let's see what he will choose. He will indeed destroy the lab, goes for a cannon, and with that at least doesn't lose any yellow token. Still being on 0 science production, in a position where he has a fine amount of culture produced, but not a good production. Let's see if he can recover from that. Maybe Pierre could help him. Maybe something like Red Cross potentially, even though he doesn't have the most food saved up for now. But yeah, let's see how he will recover from that. Now it's Wolf's turn, and he will just build some swordsmen. Interestingly, just rebuilding the phalanx tech is now also 23 strength. Interesting, all of the players are 23 strength now at the beginning of H3. That's also something you don't see that often, that when players have that high strength, that all actually have the same amount of strength. Will be very unfortunate for the player who gets hit by a strength event if one is revealed. And then wolves take some yellow cards, and now I guess it is time to take a look at the overview, and I will make a guess at the end who I think will win and how the positioning will be. So I think wolves has a very strong position. He has the ocean liner, will get lots of population. He has a very strong way to produce some culture, and he actually has already the culture lead. So if he manages to find the right balance between getting Shakespeare running while still being able to defend himself, he has already the military build-up, which I think is a very big grab for him to just be able to also build a bunch of military if needed. If he finds that balance, I think he could be in a very strong position. HCsquared has a bunch of culture saved up. There's still the strongest resource production, I think, I guess joined with kyshantry. Yeah, but he has the lowest culture production. He has a bunch of civil actions, but he has lost some yellow tokens, at least from the first war. The second one he was able to defend. Has no science production. I think H3 will be tough for him, and I think things have to be coming together for him in order to be able to stay in that game. We have Dots, who has a very solid economy, a very solid amount of strength, but he is a bit behind in culture. So yeah, let's see. He also has only 6 civil actions. Nobel will need another civil action if he replaces him at some point. So I'm not sure if his economy is that much better than Wolf's in order to really overcome that gap. So that's that, and kyshantry has 9 resource production, 8 civil actions, has a bit of a low military action count, not the most science production, but he will fix that with the Harvard College. So I think he has also quite a fine position. And my guess at the moment would be that wolves at the end, with having Shakespeare and finding the right balance, will be able to win this game. Kyshantry finishes second, having a culture lead over Dots, having more civil actions, also just having a great economy. Dots finishes third, and HCsquared, I think it will be tough for him to recover. I think he will finish last. Alright, so let's see if that will work out at the end. Kyshantry not stealing any yellow tokens. He seeds, and there's indeed a strength event. Unfortunate for wolvs and HCsquared to lose some civil actions here, but at least they get some early H3 draws. Kyshantry actually takes the computers, doesn't want to give those maybe to his opponents that early, finishes the Harvard College, plays the patriotism, and goes for another knight. One thing, of course, that could be problematic for Kyshantry at some point is that he doesn't have the best potential to maybe to go for a lot of military, and is not really nicely prepared to go for any H3 tactics, has only that heavy cavalry running, and that could be, I think, a way how he gets punished. Dots seeds, and the prosperity is revealed. HCsquared gets the most food out of it. Dots still, thanks to the 2 food that he gained, can now increase his population 2 times. Builds another opera, develops the rifleman, goes for building 1, is now 26 strength and the strongest, also upgrades his happy faces. And Armene is now at 9 culture production, so that's not bad. HCsquared will increase his population, takes the fast food chains. I guess that will be a solid wonder for him, just a way for him to get some points. And he takes the rifleman, meaning that if he gets 1 copy of Revolutionary Radio or just builds a lab or something at some point, maybe he can go for the real Napoleonic army and stay competitive in strength. He doesn't take the air forces. Of course, they are not really helpful for him. Maybe he could have taken them as a denial, but I think in his position he has to take some risks. So taking a card that he is not using for himself, just for the hopes that it will make a big difference, maybe not the right way to go, and he can hope that wolvs will now take it and not go for something aggressive, because he maybe just wants to defend himself. Wolves will go for the rockets this turn. That will at least allow him to copy the Napoleonic army. Maybe he has also an even better tactic drawn for himself. He builds the rockets, builds another rocket, copies the Napoleonic army, is now at 41 strength actually, and he isn't taking the air forces. So maybe he is saying that he's fine for now with the tactic and hope to get another copy. He takes the architecture, which will make those operas even cheaper. But for now he has only 4 culture productions. Let's see if he will start his culture production soon. Kyshantry gets the tanks, I think a very important technology for him, just getting some strength with upgrading those units. Still not the most effective, but now he could defend with either 2 H2 cards or 1 H3 defense cards. Also takes the fundamentalism, the air forces, and the modern infantry. And he actually has the hussars tactic. So that of course makes a huge difference now, because now he will actually have a solid tactic going and should be somewhat fine for the military. With the fundamentalism, who knows, can even go for something aggressive. Dots seeds and opens the independence decoration. HCsquared is the weakest, but doesn't have any colonies. Dots copies to the Napoleonic army. That makes him the weakest, meaning he can now use the wave for 6 additional resources. Builds a cannon, disbands the knights. He doesn't need that many anyway. Builds another cannon, uses all of his draws, but makes sure to stay competitive in the strength, also not allowing Kyshantry to use Catherine. And then he has just enough civil actions left to take the space flight, which might turn out to be quite a strong wonder for him. There is Spear on the road. That could be one puzzle piece that HCsquared needs to come back into the game, but of course also Gandhi is very important. Yeah, I mean, probably a tough call. Pierre producing him more culture. Maybe he's in a position where he just takes him and needs to hope that he somehow doesn't get punished, but there's no rev idea on the row for him at this point, and I don't think he would be competitive at the end. So now going for Gandhi, maybe also one way how he can come back, especially if there will be some wars happening between his opponents. wolvs at the moment doesn't really have enough military actions to punish him. Could maybe go for the military theory, but with having Shakespeare, maybe has other things in mind. Kyshantry would need fundamentalism plus military theory in order to really go for Gandhi, and Dots would maybe need communism. So Gandhi making him relatively safe. Let's see if he can actually hide behind him and still get a good result out of this game. He will play the reserves, increase his population, and actually just finishes the fast food chains. With that can grab another wonder, maybe the Manhattan Project for some military, or potentially the Red Cross if he's saving up some food. No, and I guess Gandhi probably the right call. I was very much focused on Pierre here, but Gandhi of course also very important. Nonetheless, aggressions can be played, and wolvs is stealing 7 resources. I think that is very helpful for wolvs, but at least he has to miss out on some draws. He will go for the opera, for the architecture, is a bit greedy with the science, but has already all the military text that he needs to go for the tactic, is the strongest for now. Goes for 2 pairs, is now at 16 culture production, and with that, when we take a quick look at the overview again, should be quite in the lead. HCsquared did come a bit closer with finishing that wonder. Now it's kyshantry's turn. He will not use his politics phase, takes and plays the reserves with the Harvard College, and then takes the patriotism, the military theory, I think a very important tech for him, the efficient upgrade, goes for some more upgrades. I mean, of course he gets a bunch of strength, gets the strongest now, but I'm a bit worried at the moment for him that he will find something to invest into that will produce him a bit more culture. For example, Dots has at least those operas, has the space flight for the end. Kyshantry, I guess, could maybe take the Red Cross. Maybe he can go for some computers plus Bill Gates. I guess he has some ways, but maybe that could be an issue. Also, he's not drawing that many cards because of his low military actions. This may be at least again putting some pressure on his opponents, increases his population 2 times. Dots seeds and opens the strategic territory, which at the end is won by kyshantry. Has to at least pay a tank, so that's a bit costly, but 5 additional draws could be very valuable for him. Dots upgrades a warrior to rifleman, going up to 42 strength, develops the cavalryman actually, and either he maybe really wants to have the additional strength, maybe to not lose a yellow token to Catherine, even though at that point maybe he shouldn't be too much concerned about this. Or that could of course be a very big indicator that he has something like modern army or potentially also mechanized army and wants to prepare himself for that. He is taking Pierre interestingly, who is not giving him any additional culture for now, but he takes the professional sports and the satellites, and as a leader to elect very late, just because of the Olympic Games, Pierre is of course still quite nice. HCsquared offers the military alliance to kyshantry. That of course could lead to kyshantry actually using Catherine at his next turn. He takes the reserves, builds a warrior to get a bit stronger, takes another copy of reserves, the professional sports and the military theory. With the reserves, maybe he will be a bit better prepared for the Red Cross, even though he might be missing some civil actions to really get a lot of steps in one turn going. But at least wolvs, for example, has now not enough food to build a step. Maybe one reason why HCsquared wanted to take all of those reserves, but wolvs gets another one, gets the air forces and builds up a bit more military. It remains the strongest, still has 16 culture production. Oh, but there is actually still a war against wolves, so let's quickly take a look again at wolves civilization. I thought that he might be somewhat safe, but I guess he can't go for an air force. Can't go for another tactic, and let's see what kyshantry will be able to do. So that of course could mix things up quite a bit. Let's see if wolves will still be in the best position after getting hit by that war. Kyshantry playing patriotism, playing another patriotism, going for the military theory, going for a tank, and is now at 75 strength. And now he has I guess he has just enough military actions to also declare war against HCsquared without building any more units. Maybe he could do a revolution to fundamentalism and go for some upgrades. So if he has another war, and he had not just some draws with the strategic territory too, he maybe can go for another war at the next turn, and that could of course be quite strong for him, especially maybe he has enough strength potential to even target wolves again, and then maybe he could actually be in a position to win the game. Dots opens the arms industry, which gives not a lot of resources, only 6 in total. He will now increase his military, of course, seeing that kyshantry is looking very dangerous. He has the modern army, takes the air forces, and with that at the next turn could also declare war and go for actually 2 air forces. So a bit lucky maybe for him that air force on the row, but it's quite late, and of course it would also be a bit unlucky if he's the player who misses out on them. So yeah, with that, he also could go for a war. Let's see how that will all be going. That could be bad news for wolves, because Dots also can now go for a war with an amount of strength that I think wolves cannot be able to defend against. Now it's HCsquared's turn. He will indeed go for the Red Cross, builds a step, and ends his turn. I think that's just what he has to do, just trying to get somehow some culture going. Now it's wolf's turn. He seeds, opens the Grime Wave, which will make him and HCsquared lose some culture. He will play the reserves for resources, is actually destroying a mine, builds another rocket, making himself a bit better prepared for the current war. Actually goes for another cavalryman thanks to the additional resource from arms industry. I think he was able to build now a little bit more, and then takes some cards, has enough resource to build a swordsman, but can't really do a lot more. I think he could have maybe built less for this war and then had a bit more potential with maybe going for 2 air forces at the next turn, but he also doesn't know if there are some more wars coming, so maybe fine to just prepare better for this one now. And yeah, but I think it's not looking ideal for him. He was also not really able to end the age, so I think one war maybe he can recover from, even though he now had to destroy a lot of stuff. I think things are going a little bit downhill from here, but he has a big culture lead, will get a production still, is now then has more than 100 culture, at least for a moment, until he gets some stone. So let's see if Kyshantry or Dots, or maybe even both, will go for another war in this last round where wars are possible. Kyshantry first of all steals 18 culture from wolves, is now already almost on par with him. And there will be not another war, instead an armed intervention, which of course brings him still in front of wolves now. He will build a step of the Red Cross, goes for Steve Jobs, revolutionary idea, movie skips actually Catherine for the 2 culture reduction, which probably should be fine, and then at the next turn maybe he can go for 2 techs, I guess. He has computers plus 10 science tech, yeah, so he has just enough for 2 techs, so 8 culture he will generate from Steve Jobs, and maybe also get some happy faces when he upgrades to computers. Let's see if Dots will have a war. First of all, H4 will start, and there's actually a hybrid war, and it is declared against HCsquared, so that's also very interesting. With the hybrid war, probably Dots, I guess, could have declared it against wolves, could have gone for 2 air forces, but it would have come at a huge cost for him, because with going for air forces, he can of course not really cover his happy faces, needs to destroy a lot, and so maybe he now rather wants to try getting some culture out of HCsquared with this hybrid war, and then can maybe just build some professional sports with Pierre now in order to get more strength. So he will go for professional sports, destroys a lab, builds one, plays the endowment, goes for Pierre to get the Olympics, builds a step of the Red Cross that also gets him out of corruption. At the next turn he has enough resources to finish the space flight. Also will get the Olympic Games. That of course is bad for HCsquared, hybrid war being the only war that could have been declared against him. Without that, maybe if Dots would have just had a normal war, maybe he could have had some hopes that wolves gets hit by another big war, and HCsquared, with already not being that much behind, that could have maybe been a way back in the game, also showcasing that probably Gandhi, just being the correct pick, also with that big strength pressure going on. So yeah. Also, it's H4 now, so HCsquared can't resign at this point. I guess he will finish the Red Cross and then just do as much as he can. He first of all seeds. The iconoclasm is revealed. Ooh. That's interesting now, because Gandhi gets removed, while Wolf still has one opportunity to potentially declare war. Normally he wouldn't have been able to declare war. Now out of the sudden, if he somehow has a war card available, he could declare war against HCsquared because of that iconoclasm. Also, Dots loses Pierre without getting the Olympic Games, which also is quite a setback for him. So here, quite an influential iconoclasm. I will be very interested to see if Wolves now actually can go for a war for himself. That would be huge. HCsquared will first of all play the reserves. Actually, he loses to food because of a blue token shortage. Maybe wasn't able to play around that, or maybe doesn't need more food anyway. Maybe if he has 2 more food, it doesn't help him. Maybe even causes corruption issues this turn, destroys a mine, because he could have first destroyed this mine and built some stuff and then did the other things, but maybe it could actually be on purpose, which would be a very clever move. Maybe he was a little bit careless and didn't notice it, which would be understandable, as now it is looking quite hopeless for him. But maybe it could have been also still a very clever move here, if that maybe helps him to get out of corruption this turn. I guess it doesn't, so but I guess also the 2 additional food wouldn't make a difference at the next turn, I think. Oh, and there is actually a war happening, so that iconoclasm been extremely influential. If HCsquared wouldn't have seeded, or maybe if a different event would have been revealed, that war wouldn't be possible. But now out of the sudden, Wolves maybe get something back out of the strength that he was able to build up, and that I think is huge for him, because he doesn't get a strong wonder. He needs a source to get some culture, and now he can maybe get some culture out of HCsquared, so that is a really interesting turn of events here. Wolves dispense interestingly something, so he's not maximizing his strength, maybe also just maximizing the amount of culture that he is producing, goes for flaming, Goes for the civil service. Make sure to not have... I guess he has 4 famine. Actually can't fix his famine also at the next turn, so that will actually cost him some culture. Maybe he didn't have a way around that. I guess he built an opera, but with the urban growth for very cheap. And I guess he built this temple, but only things that gave him happy faces, so yeah, I guess not that easily possible for him to completely cover the famine here. Kyshantry opens the civil unrest. Actually, lots of players have some unhappy workers, so a good event for dots. Kyshantry maybe also was the player who seeded Iconoclasm, maybe another reason to not elect Steve Jobs, but I think even without the Iconoclasm, just to get 2 additional culture, it would have been worth it, especially if he has enough civil actions now to do everything that he needs to do, and it just seems to work perfectly. Now it's Dot's turn, and he will first of all steal now some culture with that hybrid war that was still going on. He seeds, opens the inhabited territory, and Kyshantry is able to win it if there's an impact of colonies in there. That could be extremely big for Kyshantry, as we can see. He has 5 colonies, the only other player with colonies is wolvs, so if he has drawn that impact, it could be huge for him. Dots develops the satellites, finishes the spaceflight for 27 points, so he's really scoring some points with that hybrid war, with that spaceflight, and is now already quite in front of Kyshantry. So yeah, that is now not looking bad for him, being able to pull off the hybrid war, going for Pierre, missing out in the Olympics, of course. So Pierre not being that big really, but then also getting the spaceflight. HCsquared will probably now just defend as good as he can. Doesn't make a difference for him, but I think in such a situation you should just try to maximize your strength output. If it doesn't, still maybe if you of course know that impacts are in there that you can score in total better for, maybe you can also keep a little bit of stuff. You don't necessarily need to do the maximum defense, but you should just try to still figure out what gives you the most points at the end. Here he will just build a bunch more units, but yeah, he will get heavily punished by impacts, will now still get some culture stolen, so for him the game is over. Wolves will get 22 culture out of that war. He gets 3 additional resources out of the raid. I guess there would have been some aggressions that he would have preferred, but I guess at least it will give him something like 4 points, because, I mean, it's a bit unfortunate for him that he only gets 3 resources out of that raid, that HCsquared only has such cheap buildings, so, because if he would have gotten 1 resource more, he would be able to build 2 farms and has no famine at all. Now he will only be able to reduce his amount of famine, which I guess is still worth it for him, and then, before the final impacts, we can see that Dots is actually in the lead. It was quite a bit of a chaotic H3, especially at the end with those wars, with the Iconoclasm, and now that actually means that Kyshantry is only in the 3rd position, even though after he started his first war against wolves, I thought things might be looking quite good for him, but he didn't have a second war, only the armed intervention, and Dots got this hybrid war plus spaceflight, and then out of the sudden wolves was able to go for a war himself. Nonetheless, as said, if there's impact of colonies, that would be really strong for Kyshantry and could really allow him a comeback. Also, impact of strength could be nice for him. And HCsquared, of course, being out of the game, but let's see how that will end. Let's also check quickly again who has seeded how many impacts. There are actually only 4 impacts, and each player has seeded 1 impact. So let's see what movements there will be with those final impacts. And the first one is actually the impact of strength. That's a good one for Kyshantry. Gives him not that many points against Dots, but he maybe has now some good shot at the 2nd place at least. If that is his impact though, then of course there's a lower chance for impact of colonies to be in there, but maybe it was also seeded by Dots or something. There's the impact of Riety. That is very strong for Dots actually, also quite solid for wolves. Not that great for Kyshantry and even worse for HCsquared. We have the impact of population. That's quite fine for wolves. He has an unhappy worker, so that's a bit unfortunate, but with the ocean line, he's still got a lot of population. Kyshantry staying in touch, staying 5 culture behind him, so let's see what the last impact will be. Guess the one thing that will still is in contention is the 2nd place. Let's see if Kyshantry can overtake wolves. Last impact being impact of agriculture. It's not a great one for wolves, and that actually allows Kyshantry to overtake wolves here. And yeah, with that, at the end, Dots is able to win Congratulations to him. And kyshantry at least finishing second at parts of H3. I was even confident or thought that he might even have the best shot, but he missed out on some draws early in the game in H3, got then some draws from strategic, but maybe still had an amount of draws where it's definitely not guaranteed to have two wars going on. And so at the end, he at least still finishes second, and wolvs at the end, despite him getting the shot with Gandhi being removed through iconoclasm to go for a war over culture against HCsquared, he still is only able to finish at the third position at the end. Now, so my guesses, were partly right, but not that great this time. I wasn't able to guess the winner. I guessed wolvs as the winner, who now finished third. He had some issues at the end to defend himself. I'm not sure if he maybe played too greedy at parts, or if it just was very difficult to make sure that he can defend himself. And I actually thought that Dots would finish third, but he actually managed to win the game at the end. And just stayed competitive in strength, had that hybrid war, which maybe was a bit lucky having that option, but if he would have had a normal war, he could have also gone for 2 Air Force. I'm not sure if he then would have been able to finish the space flight, so maybe things would have been a bit different, but he finishes first at the end in kyshantry. Maybe he would have needed a second war, or at least he got an armed intervention, and at least finish it second. And I guessed kyshantry is second, HCsquared as last, so those I got correct, but I should have guessed Dots and wolvs the other way around. Alright, so with that, the game has finished. Quite an interesting one, especially the finish was quite crazy. And a rough game for HCsquared, but he hopefully stays positive. A lot of games are still to come in the semifinals, so still a lot of comeback potential. Things got a bit unfortunate for him. He did some choices that I maybe would have done differently, like maybe going for Universitas instead of preparing for Machu Picchu, even though of course with having Michelangelo, Machu Picchu is just very interesting, but I think we saw that maybe the resource production, if that would have been a bit of additional science, that could have maybe been more helpful. Maybe he could have grabbed a statue or something, but at the end, rough game for him, and maybe the next games will be going better. Congratulations to Dots again for winning this game, having a good start in that group. And wolvs, the highest rated player in the group, not an ideal start, but also for him, of course, a lot of games still to come. Alright, with that we are at the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed taking another look at one of those semifinals game. I'm interested to hear in your comments what you think about that game. And then also, of course, if one of the players want to share some of their thoughts, they are very welcome to. And then, with our we are at the end. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.